This is Dr. Chris's Radio Horror Show here at WCUW. This is the first of the 2 interviews tonight, so check out Joe Souza's Monster Expo interview later on. Tonight on the show, we have a fellow writer in the Dracula pantheon of multiple Dracula stories being written in the pantheon of multiple vampire stories that have been written. We have Rich Davis on the show with us, writer of Cult of Dracula and a slew of other great titles as well. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Rich.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, there's so much more Dracula stuff coming out there, and you have something else with Cult of Dracula coming out. But I wanted to ask, because of the fact that you've done a Dracula thing, and there's a great podcast that always calls vampires. Is it like a Dracula? Is it like the Dracula? It's like a Dracula thing. That's the way they described Morbius when it came out, which is absolutely terrible, and I don't want to get into it. But have you seen the coming behind the scenes for Nicolas Cage playing Dracula in Renfield?
Yeah, I have, and I'm a little, I don't know, it's a little odd to me because the way he looks, it looks like it's going to be one of those over-the-top easy vampire, the Count from Sesame Street type things. But when I was reading articles and listening to interviews with Nick talking about it, I kind of had the idea it was going to be a little more serious and darker. So I really don't know what this movie is going to be now. But I've worked in film long enough to know that the pictures that we've seen are they've not been run through post. These are on set candids, things like that. So that's not what it's going to look like. No. But what I've seen is a little different than what I was expecting. But I mean, it's Nick Cage, and who doesn't love Nick Cage? And we obviously love Dracula. So I'm gonna watch it. We'll see what happens. We'll see if it's Dark Shadows or if it's Dracula 1992.
So the other one that I wanted to mention to you, which I think I've only ever heard on Kevin Smith's podcast and very briefly mentioned before the pandemic crashed the world around us, was, have you heard of the Demeter?
I did. Yeah, you know what? I did hear about that. Obviously familiar with the Demeter from the Dracula story, but that sounds like an interesting project as well. And Dracula is the most produced body of work in the modern era. It's been produced thousands of times: film, television, books, comics.
Right. And people don't seem to get tired of it, really. What's also funny is that you say that it's the most produced. In my hand right now, I was just at a store called Bull Moose. It's a chain of physical media stores up here in the New England area, which thrive on physical media, physical graphic novels. They even, by the way, Rich, have VHS tapes, laser discs, and cassette tapes.
Oh my God, I haven't seen a laser disc in forever, man. That's all. Those are rad. I like those.
So in my hand is by Arrow Home Video, Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, and on the back it says that the Frankenstein story is the most produced. And I'm like, that is not true. Dracula has to be.
Yeah, by a wide margin. Now, Frankenstein is also very popular. I mean, that Victorian era, that was a golden age of horror. There was some great works that came out of that. But Dracula's always going to be king.
Yeah, definitely. Our all of our love of the other great things coming out based on things that we've done aside, let's get to you. Now, you mentioned you've worked in TV and stuff like that before, so I wanted to look you up on IMDb because I knew a little bit about that. By the way, there's 8 of you on IMDb, so do you have clones?
Probably, yeah. Trust me, with all the 14 to 16 hour days I worked doing crew. There's probably 9 or 10 clones of me out there. That's probably why they took the blood samples, at the beginning of every contract. They're probably cloning me in a jar somewhere, like they do everybody.
So which Rich Davis is you? Because none of them, by the way, have pictures.
Yeah, I don't even know. I've been out of the film industry for a long while. I mean,
okay. I thought this was something you were recently doing because I knew about the Netflix thing with Cult.
Yeah, now that's a different thing. So we do. It's not Netflix, by the way. But it is a streaming service. I have to be very careful.
God, because you'd get canceled after one season.
Yeah, I have to be very careful because we have non-disclosure agreements.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I mean, the film project's out there. It is actually on IMDb if you look it up. We can officially say we have a mutual interest from Tony Todd, the producers, me, the creative team, Tony himself. All 3 have a very strong interest in working together. and the producers have the money to make that happen. So as soon as we can have our good friends at SAG and all those people sign on and get the contracts worked out, you know, we can then move to saying that Tony is officially attached, and then hopefully get into production and say, hey, Tony's on set doing some really rad things. So, but it's a process, you know, working in film is, you know, it takes a long time to get from point A to point Z.
Well, I have an interesting story I'll tell you off recording afterwards about some. I don't have it. I never signed an NDA, but it's like I can talk about whatever I want. But it's kind of a funny media related story to the to mine. But your SourcePoint Press, they're really coming up in the world of being like this new kind of hot independent comic book company. I don't know how much of the market share they have versus, you know, the other independent companies like IDW, Image, and Dark Horse, but they put out a good quality product.
They do. Yeah. SourcePoint is a fantastic company to work for. I began Cult of Dracula with another company called Second Sight Publishing.
Right.
And independent, first book they'd ever published, great guys. But Cult of Dracula #1 sold so many copies that they could not afford to publish issue 2. And that's no fault of their own. You know, they just didn't have the infrastructure, didn't have distribution. So they helped me bring it over to SourcePoint. And then when I took it to SourcePoint, that's when the book really exploded. And SourcePoint's a great publisher to work for. Everything they've ever promised me, they've delivered. They're very supportive. And, you know, yeah, they're growing because they're putting out amazing work. And it's genre focused. They're not messing with superheroes. You know, Marvel and DC, they've got that locked up, and superheroes are dead anyway. They just don't know it yet. But they're genre focused. They do horror, they do pulp, they do sci-fi and fantasy, and they focus on doing that very, very well. And then they treat their creators very, very well. So yeah, SourcePoint, I like to say that they are in the position that Aftershock was in maybe 5-6 years ago.
Oh yeah, Aftershock.
Yeah, I love it. Joe over there at Aftershock, great friend, good people, and you know, Aftershock's kind of taking that big step up, and you know, SourcePoint is on their way to making that same jump. So if you haven't checked out SourcePoint books, man, go get them. There's some great stuff out there, like Good Boy, Butts and Seats by my friend Dirk Manning. Just excellent work out there from SourcePoint Press. And I couldn't be happier than I am.
I worked for SourcePoint. No, I worked for Aftershock for a good hot 5 minutes in 2020. You can imagine what happened to that job. They when life started returning and books were being printed, they're like, go back to the stores and do the thing you were doing. And I went back to one store. They're like, get out, we're going crazy with those diamond separation, DC and church and state. I don't want to talk to you. I called SourcePoint. It was just like, I'm done. I called Aftershock. It's like, guys, this is a dumb idea. Stores do not want to see a sales rep from one company after the debacle we just came back from at all. I mean, I got it from like 2 stores. Yeah, they were like, oh well, I don't know, try again with other stores, and I was like, no, I'm done, because it's supposed to be like they were doing this like marketing outreach thing with Aftershock. It was. Yeah,
I remember. Yeah,
it just at the time they started, it was fine, and then in the pandemic happened, it was just nope.
Yep, COVID flipped the world upside down, man. It ruined a lot of good things.
With SourcePoint and Aftershock, I'm good friends with Tim Seeley. I do a podcast actually based on his daughter character Cassie Hack and all of her books.
That I've never met Tim, but I actually am very close friends with Teenie Howard, who he handed off Hackslash to for Hackslash Resurrection. At Teenie actually used to work for me. I owned a comic book store, and so I'm very familiar with Tim's work, and I'm a big fan. He's a fantastic creator, and Hackslash, love it. It's one of my all-time favorite series. It's just so cool.
You owned a comic book store?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I still do. I'm just not there much. I have managers running it now. It's called Nirvana Comics. It's in Knoxville, Tennessee. We were in Wilmington, North Carolina first. That's where Teenie worked for me. But now I'm out traveling so much, promoting the book and writing every day. So thankfully, I don't have to do the day-to-day things at the comic book store anymore. I just kind of get to sit back and It's kind of like I'm retired, because I sit back and the store have great staff and partners who, while I get to go off and pretend like I'm a cool comic book creator.
I got to ask this because I'm working on a documentary about comic book stores here in New England. It's a biography book about all the different comic book store owners in New England. And I got to ask you, what's the one storyline Marvel and DC did that pissed you off?
Okay. Convergence by DC.
Everyone says that.
I have never been, because they made Convergence fully returnable. Okay, I have.
Oh, they did. I didn't know that. That's good to know. I'll add that to my notes.
I have never been happier to box up, and I think we sent back something like 20 boxes of books. I have never been happier to send that back to a publisher. That was the worst crap of a storyline, because I loved it when I read the Convergence Zero. It's all about Superman and Brainiac, and it was so. They didn't give me that story, and then they started giving me this other story, and then all of a sudden that's not the story they're giving me. Suddenly it's about Warlord, and who the heck wants to? Who was asking for a Warlord story? Nobody, but if like 10 people.
Nobody outside of anyone from the 80s and that one episode of Justice League Unlimited.
Yeah, I mean, Convergence. I've never been happier to send books back to a publisher. It was awful, and there was no point. It was money grab, is all it was.
I said out loud, I said so many times that if you never read the New 52 Earth 3 series with the whatever they were doing with those Justice Society characters, like the biggest thing that come out of that book was like, oh, this is where they made Alan Scott gay. That series or whatever. If you didn't read that book, you're so lost reading Convergence, and the only tie-in that anyone's cared about with the Convergence now is Superman Convergence #2, because it's the first appearance of John Kent as a baby right out of the womb, and I'm like, that is ridiculous. That's the first appearance. I guess it is, even though he's a baby, but it's like, oh, then why does that mean that Uncanny X-Men 201 is worth more money than
Cable,
number 87 because it's the first appearance of Cable as a baby?
The Wolverine book where there's a guy who has a scientist has a vial that has X-23 written on it, and it's like Wolverine's DNA. And so some people are saying that that's the first appearance of X-23.
Oh my God! This is as bad as like the cosplayer in a Deadpool versus Hawkeye book is cosplaying as Thor Jane, and it's like some retailers at Comic-Cons will be like, "This is the real thing," and I'm like,
"Right, yeah."
Listen, Marvel's Wiki game will tell you what the real issue is. It's Mighty Thor #1. What?
I said, you got to be careful with us comic book sellers, man. We just want to make sales. So sometimes they'll tell you anything they can to get you to buy it to spec on a book, You have a multi-cover gallery of talent on the Cult of Dracula 6 books. How many covers in total do you think you have? Okay, so we recently put all this together in.
I'm going to ask you the hard questions on here, man.
I know. In the Cult of Dracula collected deluxe hardcover or deluxe hardcover edition, we actually curated a cover gallery in the back, and I want to say across all 6 issues, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 different covers.
Oh my God!
Yeah, what the retailers? A lot of those are retailer exclusives, and these local comic book shop owners, the retailers, they embraced Cult of Dracula as their own, and they championed this book. They made this book what it is. I mean, comic book shop owners, local comic book shops are the backbone of the industry. This thing that we do doesn't exist without them. If they didn't exist, everything would have a bat dude or a spider guy in it. And
oh my God, nothing else. Jesus.
And so yeah, the retailers, I'm very privileged to have worked with some really cool retailers and some amazing artists across all different styles of art. Whatever you're into, there's a cover for you. So yeah, there are a lot of covers, and that's great because those retailers, they were able to, they made a lot of money off of supporting my work. And, I couldn't be here without them. But yeah, if you want to see all the covers, you can check out the Cult of Dracula collected deluxe hardcover edition, and there's a curated gallery in the back. So yeah, a lot of gorgeous covers.
I thought the Last Ronin TMNT book had a ridiculous amount of covers. I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
there were 75 covers. I think there were like, someone said there were like 65 covers just for one issue alone. And I was
Oh
like,
God, yeah. I mean, because it was a great book. I mean, Last Ronin was awesome, and it was another one of those things, that retailers, they wanted to support. And the store exclusives, that's been a big shift in the industry in the past couple years, and it's saving a lot of comic book stores, and frankly, it's saving a lot of creators too, because it's lucrative for us, and it gets us a lot of exposure, and it's very profitable for the retailers. So I'm very happy to see that. And now you're not limited to, because a lot of people buy books based on the cover, and
Right.
you're not limited to just one choice now. It's like there's a style of art out there for everybody. And I like Last Ronin. I was very privileged with Cult of Dracula to have so many artists and retailers providing those options for readers.
where, besides Dracula itself, the
Mhm.
novel and any
Yeah.
movie tie-in, what was a big influence to make Cult of Dracula? What was something not Dracula related, let's just say? Because I mean, I could say the same thing when I ask the same question. I'm like, the novel, and then I have to go into an explanation. Fright Night, Castlevania, things like that.
Yeah.
What's something not Dracula related that influenced Cult of Dracula?
Helter Skelter. So Cult of Dracula is essentially taking the Dracula mythology and reimagining it inside a Manson family inspired cult. When I was a kid, I saw Helter Skelter. I was way too young to see it, and it absolutely terrified me. I still to this day have nightmares about the guy who played Charles Manson and his eyes. They just scared me, chilled me to the bone. And so I wanted to I wanted to pull a Manson-like figure into my Dracula story, and it made a whole heck of a lot of sense to kind of pull him into the Renfield character. So we pulled elements of Charles Manson and Jim Jones and Warren Jeffs and David Koresh, a lot of cult leaders. They have a lot of things in common, and really have a lot of things in common with vampires when you think about it. So yeah, Helter Skelter was a huge non-Dracula related thing that inspired me. And like when I set out to write this story, I knew I did not want to tell another Dracula story set in Victorian England about a creepy Eastern European dude with a widow's peak and a tuxedo. I mean, that story's been told so many times and so well. There's
And Nicolas
absolutely
Cage is doing it soon.
and Nicolas Cage is doing it, but there's nothing I could possibly add to that story. If you want to see that story, you've got limitless options to go check it out. I wanted to do something different, so I tried to break Stoker's story down to its bare bones, and I started researching the things that Stoker was reading and the letters that he wrote and the things that he intended to say and all the things that influenced him. And so I took all of those elements, and they're all there in Cult of Dracula and then in Rise and Reign of Dracula to come out later. Those elements are all there. It's just packaged in a different way, with more of a modern perspective on it, and more of a global perspective as well, because we pull mythologies in from around the world, the Philippines and the Aswang, Jorogumo in Japan, the Deer Woman from Native American mythology. We pull all of those things in because I wanted to kind of show that vampires don't just belong to Western culture. Vampires belong to everybody. They're fundamental. They're primordial. There's something in our human DNA that makes us want to tell these stories. And so I wanted to kind of showcase that in Cult of Dracula. So Charles Manson and all the creepy, scary stories and terrifying children's songs that we sing about all these creepy figures. That's what influenced me to write Cult of Dracula.
So when you say you modernized it, like you'll have to excuse me, it's been a little bit since I read the first issue, and I've still got to get pick up the trade paperback. Mainly because all the covers were so cool, I decided to stop buying it after the first issue to be like,
He's like, I don't know what I want.
Yeah, I want all the covers. These all covers are amazing, and also this would look so much better with all my 30 million versions of Dracula that I own. I'm not a big thing. I own a copy of Dracula illustrated by Edward Gorey. I own a copy of Dracula illustrated by Ben Templesmith, by Jay Lee, by I forget, besides my own, and then a few others, but I keep buying them now because of the different artists who do their interpretations of it. And my favorite's still the Edward Gorey version because he did the stage production of Broadway back in the day with like Gela and all that stuff, which I would kill to go watch or whatever. Someone's always like, "Where would you time travel to?" And I'm like, three things: the premiere of Star Wars, the premiere of Frank Langella's Dracula on Broadway, and I always forget the third. Oh, I want to go see Elvis Presley in concert.
Yeah, that would be. Oh, I would do all the. If you build a time machine and go do all those things, please invite me. I will be your sidekick. I will be.
Okay, we will. We'll chrononauts this son of a gun, like the comic book.
I love Chrononauts. So such a good book. Great.
Wait a minute, I got a toaster right here. Let me just push down. She'll come get you. Anyone listening, that's a reference to an episode of The Simpsons where Homer uses a toaster. How do we know time travel hasn't already happened? Okay, that's the next thing we're gonna have to do. We have to do time traveling Dracula.
That could be that would be a really cool story, actually.
Nobody's done time traveling vampires. I suddenly realized. I've looked, and I'm like, nobody's done time traveling vampires. Seriously?
That sounds like a crazy idea, but then you think about it. They made Jason X, so that means somebody was sitting around probably smoking pot and saying, "It'd be really cool if we put Jason in space, but like in the future, like." And I'm sure now somebody's like,
"Oh, it's right out there with the person who was just like, what if Pinhead went to space? Right. But why?" And then you watch the movie.
Oh God, that movie
but hear me out. You watch that movie and you think about it, and you're like, okay, if Pinhead is this like immortal being, he would survive into the future. So if somebody unlocks him in the future, that plot line doesn't seem that far-fetched because they have the technology now to finally stop him once and for all and destroy the whole, whatever, configuration life and box or whatever. And it's like, the movie is kind of a mess, but there is a lot of good elements in there with the storytelling involving like the origin of the whole thing. You know what I mean? And like, now you want to figure out where the hell Christie's plotline fits into the whole thing, go right ahead. I'm not even going to bother. A friend of mine, is just like, "What are you talking about? It's easy to find it here and here." And I'm just like, great, you go back to Hollywood and rewrite that movie. Oh, wait, you can't. They're remaking Hellraiser, finally getting it back to basics. So I
love the Hellraiser franchise. It's one of my all-time favorites. And it really, going all the way back to Clive Barker's short story, it's just fantastic. But when they started doing all these like direct to DVD, direct to streaming adaptations on it, and when they finally got to, I forget the name of the film when we're talking about where it took him into space, but in the future, it's kind of like Fonzie jumping the shark. I was like, that's just a little too far. And it was a great, kind of a cool idea, like you were saying. It's just the execution was just horrible. They just did not do this story justice. So I'm very happy that we're about to reset Pinhead and Hellraiser, because that's my jam, man. That's a great. The Cenobites, some of the creepiest figures created in modern horror. They're awesome.
What you said you're working on a kid's book? I'm assuming this is not horror related at all.
It's not horror related at all. So after Rise of Dracula issue 5 hits shelves this month. After that, sometime in October, Reign of Dracula comes out. And then I've got a Frankenstein adaptation, as we were talking about earlier, called Prometheus in Chains. And then once I'm finished with that, I'm writing a children's book. It's called Brontosaurus Brown. And it's about a little brontosaurus who is alive at the time when the meteor hits Earth. And instead of dying, she is magically encased in amber. And the amber functions sort of like a TARDIS. It's magical. It keeps her alive. It's bigger on the inside. And she has access to every book that's ever been written or ever will be written. So she spends millions of years reading books. And so when she gets into the modern era and wakes up, she meets some friends. Some of them are going to be humans. Some are going to be anthropomorphic animals like her. And they're going to go on adventures through literature. So it's going to be a really fun, cool story to tell. And after all of the terrible, terrible, horrible things I do to children in Cult, Rise, and Reign of Dracula, I got to put some good karma into the world. And so these kids are going to have fun adventures and not end up on a chef's table or a vampire chef's table where they're cut into pieces and cooked for guests at a steak dinner.
Wow, what is it with cannibalism all of a sudden? We have like Fresh and like, you know, there was this short film I just watched called Maneater. Cannibalism seems to be in again.
It is, yeah, and it's also, you know, vampires in a lot of in most cultures, non-Western cultures, they are flesh eaters. They consume flesh as well as blood. Now, the Western idea of the vampire, we've shifted it to blood, but you know, if you dive into global folklore and, you know, look outside of our own cultural lens, you know, we see that there are different perspectives on vampires, and so flesh eating was something that's one of the things I wanted to pull in. And yeah, it's cool right now. I don't know if it's cool, I mean, if that's a good word to say, but it's popular right now in film and fiction, because there's just something kind of just terrifying about eating other people, you know?
Yeah. I hope, I mean, I never want to sound like one of those people who's just like, heavy metal leads to like terrible things with youth and drug, you know, because it sounds like the McCarthy era of the comic book, witch burning that we, thank God we didn't live through. But at the same time, I'm always wondering, like, is there, is it, you ever think we're going to have like a rise of a serial killer cannibal or something like that? It'd be terrifying.
Yeah,
because we have serial killers already with knives and kidnapping people. We have people with guns doing terrible things. Is cannibalism possibly something that is maybe the FBI just has such a tight lid on?
Maybe. I mean,
it's terrifying to think about, but we both work in horror, so it's more. Right. It's also entertaining.
We got to be careful that we don't start another satanic panic from the 80s, but yeah, it could be out there, and the Bureau could be covering it up. I mean, the FBI is listening to us right now, along with Mark Zuckerberg. So let's just ask them, hey guys, is cannibalism like a thing? I don't know if I got an answer, but I'm sure the FBI will be contacting us eventually.
Definitely. Rich, where can people go to find you online?
Yeah, so social media, very active on Facebook and Instagram. It's just Cult of Dracula comic on everything. You can look for me on Twitter, and apparently there is an official Cult of Dracula Twitter account, but I don't use it because Twitter terrifies me. So Facebook and Instagram. Soon we're going to be on TikTok. Still have no idea what I'm going to do on TikTok because I'm not a hot, attractive woman. I can't dance. I'm not really all that. So I don't know what I'm going to do on TikTok, but I'm going to be on TikTok soon. So
what you do is you take a slideshow, your best covers from the first issue, and since you have like 1,000 of them, you take your best covers from the first issue. I mean, don't repeat the covers that are like, oh, this is black and white versus the other one. But you take your best covers per issue, and you basically put them in a slideshow with the music that's on TikTok, which you can find a lot of really cool vampire music on there. I do it with mine as well, and that's pretty much what you do.
I think you just gave me my my TikTok battle plan, and you gave it to me more concisely than anyone that I've consulted with about this. It's crazy. I've actually paid people to consult on what the hell should I do on TikTok, and they couldn't give me a straight answer like you just did. So thank you. I think that's what we're going to do.
Use the smog feature as well, because it says smog, but honestly, it looks more like smoke. If you go to the Radio Horror TikTok, you'll see a lot of the way I do it as well. And I've used like the Blade music, that or like the which is like the Hammer Horror Dracula. There's
that. Oh God, I watched so much Hammer horror growing up.
I do a podcast you should come on for called Boobs, Blood, and Badasses, the Hammer Horror Podcast.
Anytime.
We're covering the Karnstein trilogy right now, coming up soon. Me and my co-host are finally getting back together. She had to stop and leave for quite a while, and she's got everything situated. And I asked her, I'm like, are we still friends? Do you want to come back? She's like, yes. Let me tell you everything that's happened. I'm like, oh great, so let's totally do this. So and she's like my pixie goth co-host or whatever, who's I kind of run all of the so what happened in this movie is not okay, right? And she's like, no, let me tell you about the patriarchy. But at the
It's
same
all
time, we have a lot of fun talking about the overly sexualized stuff of these Hammer horror movies in such fun
Yeah.
ways because we both have great sense of humors, and we're about to
Mhm.
cover a set of Hammer movies that are nothing but like boobs and blood.
Yeah, and there's a lot. What you're doing with your podcast is actually really cool and very consistent with Stoker and what he wanted to do, because Dracula was written really as a critique of the hypocrisy of the Victorian attitudes towards sexuality. The brides, for example, they're these big voluptuous women and they're seducing Jonathan, and it's meant to say that women are out of control and should go back to the kitchen essentially. But meanwhile, while they're doing that, and also throwing Oscar Wilde in prison for being gay, they're the members of Parliament are going to Molly houses and dressing up like women and having debauched orgies. So Stoker was really trying to lay a critique on that. So your podcast is hitting the nail on the head. I think Stoker would be proud of it, man.
Yeah, I'll reach out when we get back into recording mode next month, and I'll throw the 3 films that we're doing, and you can come on for one of them and talk about it with us from beginning to end. We've had getting a hold of, oh god, I'll tell you a story after I hit stop and record about the show and a Hammer actress that almost was. But yeah, so people find Rich online, go to your local comic book store and look up Cult of Dracula and everything else that Rich has done and what's coming out. Thank you so much, Rich.
Man, thanks for having me. I really had a good time.